Hi, sorry, sometimes my computer freezes and I haven't figured out why. So, this is Evaluating Sources and Bias, part 2. Okay, so we were talking about autism being caused by vaccines and how this is written as a fact. When research information is presented to you like it is a fact, that is a big sign that this information is actually biased. What you want to look for is like nice balanced language, like autism may be caused by some vaccines, like further research is needed. And using words like maybe, might, could be, possibly, those kind of modal verbs that help say a possibility, this is a sign that this research is nice and balanced. It means we have an idea and we're trying to figure out like if it's correct or not. So you have to be very, very careful about factual language. And if there is factual language presented to you, I highly recommend you go and find other sources. So this is the next part of talking about bias. When we do research in level 7, we really ask you to find like one source to support your work. But when you're doing actual academic research, one source is never enough, especially when you are dealing with scientific information. So always compare statistics, and facts between different sources. So if one article says autism is caused by vaccines and they're saying it like a fact, that should be a sign for you to be like, okay, I need to go check some other research, maybe research that was done more recently. Or lots of times for scientific research, people try to recreate the experiments that someone did to see if they would get the same results. If they get the same results, that verifies the findings of the first research. But sometimes they get different results and they say, listen, that research was not done well. And we did it a different way and we got different results. So even if you don't use these same sources that you're comparing, if you don't use all of them in your paper, that's okay. But it's really important that you check that your sources are actually factual or as up to date as possible. So the two things we've learned so far about bias is, one, check who paid for the research and does it benefit them. It turns out that the original research that says autism is caused by vaccines was actually paid for by an anti-vaccine group, like a group that already thought vaccines were dangerous, and they paid for this research to be done and kind of paid for that research to give the results that it did. Now, that same research has been done again many, many times and proven it wrong. So if you just look at that first study, you're going to think autism is caused by vaccines. But if you do a little bit more like digging into sources, you will find out that that research is actually bad research, and many people have disproven it later. So you don't want to be embarrassed by using bad research in your paper. So double check to see if other people doing the same research have gotten same or similar results. Okay. So check who pays for the research and compare your sources with other sources. Okay, how else can we avoid bias in our research? The next thing I want you to do is consider alternate perspectives. So If your research is on how stress is really bad for students and it's bad for their health and bad for their mental health, it would probably be a good idea for you to find some sources that say the opposite. Like maybe there's some sources that talk about how stress is good for you or how stress is a natural part of our body's machinations. And we looked at this a little bit in level 8, right? Like we did some research about stress and we found out, oh, interestingly enough, if you think about it the correct way, stress is our body's way of like making us ready to do work and make us prepared to deal with challenges. So, even if you are arguing one thing, it's really good in a paper to acknowledge that there are different perspectives on your argument. It makes you look like a responsible researcher, where you can say, yes, a lot of the research says that like stress has terrible mental health and physical health repercussions. However, some people also believe that stress can be quite good for you in the following ways. So, considering opposite or different perspectives than your perspective is a great way of checking for bias, first of all. Because number one, you're like, oh, maybe the one paper I read that supports my argument actually is totally alone, and the rest of the people researching this topic believe something totally different. So that's really another way to avoid embarrassment with your sources and your perspectives. Okay. So these are 3 great ideas. 1, consider alternative perspectives. 2, compare research and see if people got similar results to the research you did. And 3, check who is paying for or who benefits from the results of your sources. All right. And finally, it's always good to read your research with a critical eye. This is something that we really, really stress in Canadian academia, where we really stress the ability to look at anything, and it doesn't matter who wrote it. It doesn't matter if I wrote it. It doesn't matter if the best expert in the world wrote it. It doesn't matter if it is a paper that is like super famous and everyone thinks it's perfect. Your job as an academic, your job as a person at university is to look at the paper and ask questions like, why was this written? What if they are wrong? What's the alternative? This is the result, and what? And how does this affect us? And also listen to your intuition. Intuition is really interesting when you're doing research, because sometimes you read stuff that really challenges the way that you think about the world. And sometimes our first idea is to just shut it down, be like, I don't agree with this. And that's like your gut talking, that's your heart talking. But it's really sometimes a good idea to be like, I don't necessarily agree with this. That's when I'm going to go and look at other perspectives and other research that might challenge this, and maybe that's something that aligns with like my worldview a little bit better. On the other hand, it's really important to understand that maybe the things that we believe and the things that we think are facts and the things that we understand are like rooted in our culture and our religion and our personal beliefs, and these are not necessarily true. So something that is really challenging for a lot of students is the fact that Canada has legalized marijuana, for example. And I've talked a lot about this with students over the last couple of years, like since legalization happened. And a lot of students come to this country from countries where drugs are very illegal, like you go to jail forever. and your whole life you have been told that drugs are terrible, that they make you crazy, that people cannot control themselves, that they're very addictive. But the research for marijuana doesn't really support those ideas. The research on marijuana is that it is incredibly safe. Almost nobody dies taking it. There's lots of research that says that it is not addictive. There's lots of research that says it has many medical benefits. So sometimes our personal views are going to make us biased. Like, we are biased. And that harms our ability to interact with new information. So it's really, really important that you also check your own biases, so that when you're reading information that might challenge some of your views, that you read that information with an open heart and an open mind. Okay, so that is my first YouTube lecture on bias and evaluating sources. I hope it was helpful for you. And please go on to look at the other things that I posted, and I will see you tomorrow. Mwah. Have a great day.